I just wanted to talk a little bit about things that we've learned in a year plus of pandemic teaching. And I know that experience has been very different for different people at different institutions and different locations, but there's some hopefully common themes that we can pull together. And then I have an exercise that we can do at the end where I'd love to get all of your thoughts about things that you are going to bring back with you from this experience. So let's go. Did it move to the next slide?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to just a little quick outline. I'm going to talk about things that I learned from pandemic teaching that I really want to keep when we move back into the classroom in three broad categories, thinking about course design, thinking about content delivery, so how we actually deliver the content to the students, and then finally my pet thing that I almost always talk about, which is how we assess our students. And I would make the argument that the curriculum and the assessment are actually the same thing. And then at the end, I want to leave some time to have a discussion with everyone about what are the things that you are most looking forward to keeping when we go back to quote unquote normal. But I don't think we should go back to normal. That's the point of this presentation. I think we should take what we've learned and keep the good stuff. So in terms of course design, I have sort of four things that I want to talk about, one of which was the importance of learning outcomes. So a lot of times, maybe you're required to have learning outcomes, but when we were moving to online teaching, it was very drilled into everybody that you want to make sure that you're focusing on the key learning outcomes. So what do you want your students to know? What do you want them to take away from your course? Make sure that you're teaching that. When you're teaching sort of in an emergency situation, just not with enough time to fully develop an online course, you can't possibly do absolutely everything that you had done before. So you want to make sure that you're keeping the most important things and taking that material and honing it down to these are the absolute keys that we really, really want to make sure that our students know. I think that was a valuable exercise. I sort of got rid of things, either assessments or topics or things that aren't actually central to the message of the course. So refining and pruning things that are unnecessary and making sure that we're focusing on those key learning outcomes that we want our students to know. Secondly, having a predictable structure has been really nice, especially for online learning. So a lot of times, the routine of coming into class every week or twice or three times a week, however often you see them, that imposes a structure and a routine on the students, which helps them stay focused. And if you have frequent tests or whatever, or in-class quizzes or whatever, anything to keep them sort of on top of the material. When you're not having as many contact hours with your students, if it's online or if you have some kind of reduced contact hours, it becomes much harder to maintain that structure. And of course, you could tell a student like, oh, just, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 to 10 a.m., focus on this course. But it's way more difficult to stay motivated. It is for me, and I'm 38, so I imagine it's even harder when you're 18 or 19 to be so self-disciplined, to have set aside the time every day or whatever to keep on top of your material. So having a predictable structure for your course, releasing material at the same time every week, having regular check-ins, maybe you email, have a checklist of what's due this week or something like that. So making use of either you can just emailing students with reminders once a week at the same time, like don't forget this week you have to read chapter 2 and we have a quiz on Thursday. Just regular communications like that. There's no reason we can't keep doing that when we go back into the classroom. So that's a really nice thing that I'm definitely going to keep. So having predictable structures and regular reminders of what's coming up. I'm going to skip the third one for a second and talk about the fourth one and then come back to the third one. Actually, I should have put them in the other order. One thing that's really important as well, again, with more independent learning, is giving students some more agency over the learning that they're going to do in your course. So maybe allowing them to choose topics or for a project or for an assignment, or allowing some flexibility in terms of which assessments they have to do. So having a choice of two options for an assignment, or let's say there's 5 tests and you just drop the lowest one or something like that. So allowing students to take some agency and some ownership of their own learning and maybe learn from each other as well. So having that, that's gonna be a common through line in my other 2 sections as well. And then finally, the third thing on here is definitely, I touched on this before, the idea of flexibility and having compassion for your students, which I mean, hopefully we all had before, but I think having dealt with everything going on and understanding how hard it can be to struggle with time management and other obligations if you have like family members who are sick or in social isolation or all sorts of issues that can come up. Just being more empathetic towards your students is something that we should definitely not only do during a pandemic. We should have empathy for our students all the time and have flexibility and compassion. So not being so rigid that there's no coming back from a mistake. In the real world, right? If you mess something up, you can learn from it. The point is learning. So having that sort of growth mindset and imparting that to our students is really important. So those are some things that I'm hoping to keep when I move back in the classroom. I'm going to focus more on keeping those key learning outcomes top of mind, having a predictable structure and regular reminders of what's coming up, maybe with a checklist tool inside your learning management system if you have that set up so that students can actually check them off themselves, giving students more choice, and also just being more empathetic and more flexible and compassionate because everyone is going through stuff and you never know what your students are going through. Next, I wanted to talk about content delivery. So this was the big sort of new thing, I guess, in terms of rather than standing in front of a classroom and writing on a board with chalk or using slides and having a conversation with students, a lot of times you had to move to an asynchronous delivery, of the course material. Now, some institutions did like synchronous online delivery, which has its own challenges as well in terms of accessibility and equity. But in Waterloo in particular, we were all very, very strongly mandated to go completely asynchronous with our material. And so that was a very different experience. Creating asynchronous materials was an interesting and challenging task, but lots of ways to make them effective. So still having this idea, and this ties into what Jed was saying with these sort of open access resources, open educational resources, that you can refer students to a video that exists and that already is out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, and make use of those things that are already available and build in sort of thought questions like, when you're watching this video, pause it after this, the problem is stated, see if you can solve it on your own before unpausing and seeing the solution. So integrating kind of active learning into an asynchronous course asset. Going along with that is accessibility. So making sure that if you do create any videos that they're captioned. There's lots of really great captioning software out there. And that was one of the things that my students asked for before the term began. I surveyed them and said, what was helpful in previous courses? And they said, oh, captions on videos. I was like, oh, that hadn't occurred to me, but of course, yeah, I can absolutely do that. And I found a program that works fairly well. It requires a little bit of editing for the math. It doesn't quite understand math very well, but for most things, it did pretty well. And so that just makes things much more accessible to students who might have trouble following verbal only information, particularly students for whom English is not their first language. And also videos can be making sure that they're in a format that can be sped up or slowed down. So if people have a Chrome plugin or whatever, or they can download the video and watch it on a player. Sometimes people like to listen to things sped up or slowed down to align with the way that they like to pay attention to videos. So having those accessibility things was really neat. As well, when we think about going back into the classroom, I definitely want to make sure that I strongly recommend to everyone who did create videos like this, so anyone who was involved in Jed's project or anyone for your own courses, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. When you're back in the classroom, you put time and thought and effort into those videos, you can still use them. You can use them just in a different way. So it can be something that students watch outside of class before class begins, maybe a 5-10 minute video, and then they come to class having already seen that, and you can dive straight into actually working with problems. So that's known as a flipped classroom approach, where there's sort of a little bit of pre-work, and then you focus the class time on active learning and engaging with the material. Every research ever that's been done on education says that it's more effective to learn in that active way, although students, in the process of it, think that they're learning less, but they actually are learning more. So if you face any pushback, you say, would you rather be someone who thinks they know what they're doing and then doesn't do well on the exam, or someone who thinks they're not learning much and then does well on the exam? Everyone would want to be in the second group. And so making sure that you're getting students to actively engage with the material in the valuable, precious time that you have with them in class. That's something I'm definitely going to be taking back with me, that treat that time that you have together as precious, and don't just use it to give people definition after definition after definition. They can get that beforehand in a quick video, and then when you're in class, you can work with it. You can actually do stuff and see how to apply it. So those are some things that I'm going to bring back with me. The idea of using asynchronous videos and a little bit more discussion boards as well, in terms of having asynchronous communication between students and also between students and course staff. Huge fan of accessibility. I have heard, and I'm going to try this out when I'm back in the classroom, of live captioning just voice. So basically I would talk and then words would appear on a screen behind me. I'm going to try that because I talk very quickly, and students have told me that they would love to have me captioned when I'm actually just talking. So we'll see how that goes. But they've gotten pretty good AI captioning. So I'm excited to try that in person as well. And of course, I'm really excited to move into a flipped approach where I have these videos and then we'll do the work in the classroom when we're together. Finally, last thing before we move to sort of a more general discussion is assessment. So I talk about this almost every arc. I talked about this last arc in terms of how you design your assessments needs to be aligned with those learning goals. If your goal is for students to be able to communicate ideas effectively, then you have to assess them on communicating their ideas effectively. If your goal is for students to be able to create new problems or solve problems they've never seen before, or do multi-step problems or create new models, you need to assess them on those higher level skills. And you also need to assess them on those basic skills as well. It's not a substitute, it's assess over a range of skill levels and learning depths. And a big thing with that that I've come to love is this idea of authentic assessment. So that just means something that's not busy work, something that's meaningful. So having them do, again, something that might be related to what they might do in the workplace, but generally just something that has actual inherent meaning, rather than like, here's 10 actuarial functions, solve them all, and that's it. It's more about, why are they different? What would happen to this if the interest rate was larger? Or calculate one and then write up a memo of the result that you've done. Or here's 2 insurance products, calculate something for them, and then make a recommendation for a hypothetical client. Which one would you recommend based on their individual needs? So things that allow them to engage their higher levels of learning and do something that's actually meaningful is going to be a way better way to assess your students. At the same time, though, you want to make sure that your assessments are still achievable. If every question on every test is a super, super complicated research methods problem, as Russell would term it, that's too intimidating. You need some problems that are a little bit more straightforward, let's say, something that an average student would be able to do about 60% of the problems. You don't want those questions where, you can't have every question be one of those ones where only 20% of the students will get it right. You want a range of difficulty levels so that students will be able to achieve a reasonable mark on it if they know a reasonable amount of material. And another thing to think about in terms of assessment is that it shouldn't just be one assessment at the end of term, just a final exam, and that's it. There should be plenty of opportunities for students to learn for themselves how they're doing in terms of like a diagnostic assessment, so a low or even no stakes quiz where they can just do a practice problem and check, oh, did I get this right? Or having something, again, in a video where it's pause the video, think about this, and then unpause and find out the answer. Formative assessments, so things like quizzes or assignments that are taking place through the term where they're getting regular feedback to see, am I understanding this? Am I able to perform at the level I need to in the time that I need to if it's a timed assessment? And having the summative assessment, the final exam, if there is one, flow from those other two. So the diagnostic prepares them for the formative and the formative prepares them for the summative. Excuse me. So again, I'm really looking forward to bringing these ideas back with me to the classroom, having tons of authentic assessment where I let students have some agency over what they're doing and what they're doing is actually meaningful, making sure my assessments are aligned with my learning goals and a reasonable level of difficulty, and having that through line of assessment throughout the course so students learn what they know. So finally, I would like to invite you all to join this Padlet. So I'm going to just copy and paste this link here in case, because I don't think you can click on sorry. I wonder if I already have it in my clipboard. Paste? Nope, I don't, sorry. I'll have to go get it. Arg, sorry. Could have prepared that better. And going into the chat. There we go. So if you would like to jump over to that screen there and just add your thoughts about things that you would like to keep from the experience of pandemic teaching. If you want, you can have you're in the back of your mind things that you're happy not to have to do anymore. I would be super happy if I never have to say, oh, let me share my screen any more times or forget to unmute myself. I would love to not have to do that ever again. But this is for things that you learned or tried or want to keep doing when we move back into in person. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a second and then share this myself so that we can talk about all of the neat ideas that people are putting in. All right. I'll give everyone a second and I'll just happily read out what people have done. Oh, excellent. Oh, such a good idea. The idea of accessibility, of having live and Zoom office hours. That is such a great idea. Whoever put that in, I totally agree. Students sometimes are a little bit shy to like walk into a professor's office. And I just learned like 2 days ago that if you say office hours, what that means to a professor is time when students should be able to come and see you. But some students interpret that as, oh, that's office hours. That's when nobody's supposed to bother you. So it's exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to mean. So having an idea of having both in-person and virtual office hours is a super, super great idea. I'm going to keep that as well for sure. Oh, nice. Someone has an assessment of practice exam and then a mock exam and then an actual exam. So that fits perfectly into this idea of making sure that students are prepared in terms of diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments. Great idea to keep that as well. Past video recordings. Excellent. Yeah, we have these great resources that people have made, either you've made yourself or other people have made that you have access to. Jed's great course on loss models. If anyone's teaching, sorry, I keep saying Jed's. I know it's not just yours. Jed and the team's great course. Yeah, making use of those resources is going to be really good. Consistent weekly routine. I love it. Excellent. Oh, yes. Chat feature of Zoom, students are sometimes more comfortable typing a question than raising their hand in class. And actually, you can integrate something like that into the classroom as well. I've seen people do it. So just if you're looking for a tool to do it, what you want to Google is back channel, something like a back channel. So it's basically like a feed somewhere where students can type in questions that come up during the class, and then they can either answer each other or the instructor can look at it as well. It would be pretty tricky, I think, to get used to both monitoring a back channel and teaching in front of a class live, but it could be something that you could get used to and might be really, really valuable. But I 100% agree. Some students are more comfortable typing a question than raising their hand and asking it. Online discussion groups. Yes, absolutely. 100%. We had a great really beautiful community that we built on our online discussion board. We use Piazza, but there are many others that are similar. Campus Wire is another great one. Slack is another great one. Or even Microsoft Teams often has chat type things. But yeah, driving people there and having people answer each other's questions can really build community in a great way. Pardon me. Let's see. In addition to bringing paper copies of in-class quizzes, I plan to also post those online. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. And someone else commenting, they'll go completely electronic problem sets. Yeah, you can sort of, with the nice thing about those is that it's so easy to randomize the numbers, right? Like or the order of the questions, or have a draw from a bank of questions. So that can be a really nice way to give students tons of opportunity to practice without giving away what's going to be on the real one. Exactly. Ooh, I love that. Student video solutions. Continue to have students create and post videos for in-class problems. That's amazing. That's such a cool idea. And again, because you need to understand something at a deeper level to be able to explain it to somebody else. So thinking about, a student taking the time to actually make a video, it's going to be a little bit more in depth and a little bit higher level learning than just writing it out. And then, how are you actually going to explain this? And the nice thing too is a lot of platforms will allow students to view each other's videos and even comment or rate them. So something like Critic or Bongo has a thing like this, which can integrate with your learning management system. So students can upload videos and then they can view and edit, or sorry, not edit, pardon me, view and comment on or evaluate, like say 5 other students' videos. And then each student will receive 5 evaluations from other students and get some feedback on it. So that can work really well in a large class. If you don't have time to watch 100 videos, you can get your students to be 100 evaluators and each evaluate 5 other students. And then they get some really nice feedback from each other. Yeah, that can work for not just for problems, but for actual projects. Yeah, I've done that for kind of like a case study thing, and then just had people look at each other's and evaluate each other's, and of course, coming with that agency, allowing students to actually choose their own topics. Ooh, poll feature in Zoom. Yes, that would be really cool. I love doing polls in class. And if you have something like clickers or any kind of Socrative or Poll Everywhere or anything like that that you can actually use in a classroom, that's great. But if you don't, you can do a low-tech version, which I adore. You just have a question, A, B, C, D, E, and you tell the students to put their hand in front of their chest with what, A, B, C, D, or E. And they just hold it here. So it's not as intimidating as raising your hand. It's here. It's just between you and the professor. Nobody can see beside you what you've said. And then as the professor, as the instructor, you can look around and very quickly get a sense of like, okay, I see lots of 2s and a few 3s. Let's talk about this. Or, you can see if there's answers all over the place. But it requires 0 technology, and it's not as intimidating as doing, a show of hands, who thinks yes, who thinks no, because people are sometimes shy to raise their hands like that. All right, I think I have 2 minutes left. There are some really great things here as well. I see Gradescope or other online submission. Right, yeah, if you weren't familiar with tools like that, Crowdmark is another one, Gradescope is great. There's a few others. Those are fabulous. I've been using them for years. And yeah, if that's something new, then definitely keep those if you can when going back, because it's just so, it simplifies the administrative aspect of grading, and it makes it so much faster rather than having to pass a pile of papers from various people or flip the papers. Just having it done online is much easier to give meaningful feedback too, because you can have comments that are fairly detailed and then copy and paste them on the appropriate papers. I see one other, I still haven't done the flip. I know you have advocated it for years. That's okay. Neither have I. I keep saying I want to do it, but the biggest stumbling block was creating those videos. But now that I've created the videos, that's the biggest hurdle to get over. Yeah, students to create, creating mini videos for topics that students struggle with. That's such a great idea. And again, you don't have to do that all at once. You can build up a library over time. But if creating a bunch of videos is something that you did do in the last year and a half, then make use of those. Don't just get rid of them. All right, I think I'm bumping up to the end of my time. Are there any? I saw some great comments in the chat. Yeah, YouTube will do captions automatically. Zoom will do captions automatically. Teams will. So will Google Meet. So they've gotten so good. It's pretty scary, actually, how good they are. But my favorite mistake, though, is they thought that the Poisson distribution was the awesome distribution. So I'd say like X is a random variable, a Poisson random variable. And it said X is an awesome random variable. I'm like, yes, it is. Anyway, so I think I'll wrap up there. I know it's time for a break. And then we have the CAS networking session next. So thanks everyone for your attention. Thanks for your great ideas on this Padlet here. You're welcome to come back and check them anytime. And if you have any cool resources to share, you can add them, and we can keep this document as a living document for ideas when we move back into the classroom. Thanks very much, all.